Boipeba, an idyllic island on the northeast coast of Brazil, is under threat from a major luxury tourism project. And that's what we're talking about on Brazil this week. Hello everyone, welcome back to Brazil This Week. My name's Euan Marshall. I'm the Deputy Editor of the Brazilian Report, the journalistic engine behind Brazil This Week and all of our other videos. I'm delighted to be joined today by our correspondent in Brasília, Cedê Silva. How are you doing, Cedê?
I'm great, Euan. Thank you for having me.
And so this week, as I mentioned at the beginning there, we're going to talk about the case of Boipeba, which probably a lot of you will never have heard about. It's an island on the northeast coast of Brazil. And it's facing these predatory threats from luxury tourism and major billionaires involved. And I think to kind of change things around this week, because this was a story that I worked on myself, I'm going to ask Cedê to kind of take my position and ask the questions this week, so that we can kind of just go into this topic a little bit, and so that everyone can find out what's going on in the northeast of Brazil. So yeah, whenever you're ready, Cedê, I'm all ears.
Thank you. This will be my pleasure, Euan. First of all, let me start saying that I'm jealous because you visited one of the most beautiful places in Brazil, a beautiful, beautiful island off the coast of Bahia. And I understand that André, who is with us, has some pictures to show our audience of the beautiful island of Boipeba, where you have recently been. You've spent a week there. And I would like to start by you telling us exactly what Boipeba is and what is this project that is threatening this paradise.
Yeah, so Cedê, as you can see in these pictures, Boipeba is it's known for its beaches. It has been voted in the past the second most beautiful island in the world, with the Easter Island in Chile coming first place. But basically, it's an island in what they call the archipelago of Chinaré, which is off the coast of Bahia State, which is in the northeast of Brazil. It's just a couple of hours south down the coast from the state capital of Salvador. And it's a small island made up of beaches, these gorgeous beaches, and this kind of untouched nature that you see all around its coast. It's very close to a really popular tourism spot in Bahia, which is Morro de São Paulo, which is one of the most famous and popular tourist destinations in the whole of Brazil. And so Boipeba is a little bit different. It's like you have a massive crowds going to Morro de São Paulo, and then you have maybe, I don't know, let's say 10% of those people going a little bit further south into Boipeba. And so basically what's going on is that this is, for anyone who's been there, or for those who haven't been there and just want to kind of understand a little bit more about how it works, is it's one of these really like sleepy islands. Lots of the beaches are quite deserted. There's only a few people working there to kind of make lunch and sell drinks, that sort of thing. It's really very laid back and very quiet. And we have recently found out about a massive tourism development being proposed on the south end of the island, which would, it foresees the construction of like almost 200 houses, 2 hotels, a pier, an airport, and a golf course. All of these, really this kind of equipment and infrastructure that is just completely beyond what comes to mind when you think of Boipeba, this really kind of sleepy island. And we found that there are quite a lot of issues with the project, and that was basically what our story was.
Yeah, so speaking of your story, the title includes The Battle of Boipeba Against the Billionaires. Who are these billionaires and who are these people that want this development to happen?
Well, that's one of the things that really drew a lot of people's attention to this particular project, is because, so it's called the Fazenda Ponta dos Castelhanos. Ponta dos Castelhanos is the southernmost beach on the island of Boipeba, and the farm kind of surrounds that beach and a large part of the southern portion of the island. And so this project is being led by a company called Mangaba Cultivo de Coco. And Mangaba Cultivo de Coco is like, the name kind of gives it away in Portuguese. It's a coconut growing company. They're meant to be growing coconuts, coconut palm trees, and that is what they're officially listed as on Brazil's corporate registry. Their main function is to grow coconuts, but they have no record of actually ever growing coconuts. And then things start to get a little bit more interesting when we see that this coconut company that has never grown coconuts is also owned by some of Brazil's richest men, billionaires, really. One of the biggest shareholders in the company is called José Roberto Marinho. He is one of the three sons of Roberto Marinho, who was the founder of the massive global media conglomerate in Brazil. So he's worth a lot of money. Forbes magazine have estimated his wealth, José Roberto Marinho's wealth, at about $1.8 billion. And so he's one of the people behind this, in this coconut growing company that's never grown coconuts. And also, there's a former president of Brazil's central bank, Arminio Fraga. He has a 12% stake in the company, and an 8% stake of the company is with his nephew, who announced that he'd lost 95% of his wealth last year. So yeah, it's just fascinating that you would then have these two massive billionaires and well-known people in Brazil involved in this project.
Yeah, so you've mentioned something about the location of this proposed project in the southern tip of Boipeba, in the Ponta dos Castelhanos. André has a map for us, and it also will give the readers an idea of the size of this proposed project in relation to the island. And something you've mentioned in the story, which is very curious, is supposedly these developers, they want to buy 20% of the island. How is that? Because I understand that is not possible legally in Brazil.
Yeah, it's a really complicated one. I mean, looking at this map just for a second, this shows you the whole island of Boipeba. You have the small town of Velha Boipeba in the north. Going down the east coast, that's where you have all of your famous beaches. There's another one in there that's not shown, Coeira, Tasmirim, Moreré, Bainema. And then you have this part of the south. Everything that's in orange there is the developers of this particular project. They claim that they own all of that area as the Fazenda Ponta dos Castelhanos. But owning land on an island like that in Brazil it's a lot more complicated than it sounds, because Brazilian law says that all of its islands, all the country's islands, are federal land, providing that they don't have a municipal headquarters, like a city hall. If there's a city hall on the island, then the island belongs to that municipality. But if there's no city hall on the island, then it's federal land. And that's the case of Boipeba, because Boipeba is part of the municipality of Cairu, which is in a separate island. It takes about an hour to get there from Boipeba, but it's not on that island. So that means that you can't own the land on Boipeba. The federal government owns the land on Boipeba. So if you want to do anything, if you want to do these sorts of developments, what you need permission from the government. You need permission from the SPU, they call it, which is the Federal Property Secretariat. So basically, they decide how federal property should be used, how it can be used, and they give out licenses for people who want to use it. But even without this permission, the Mangaba Cultivo de Coco, this company that has the right to use, they say, this land, they claim that they can begin these building works without the actual proper permits from the federal government.
Okay, and this map brings us to my next question. Is we can see a red dot on the southern corner there, which reads Cova da Onça, the Jaguar's Den, which is a fishing village. And I understand some of these fishers whom you've talked to, and they don't want their names listed. There's a controversy about the fishing community in Cova da Onça. Why is that?
Well, so as you see with this map, it's like there's a large part of this which all the boundaries they don't quite make it to the end of the coast, especially over on the west side and the southern side. And so for most of that, there's no issue because there's not really any settlements. There's no one living on the kind of on the southwest side of the island. But in Cova da Onça, which does not come under the boundaries of this project, there is a little village there. There's a fishing village, as you said, it's one of the few places on Boipeba where people live that you don't get that many tourists. You will have some people going there as part of like boat tours and things. Maybe they will know the guy who drives the boat, and they will send them there for lunch afterwards. But in general, it's just this quite small fishing village, just with people working, because on Boipeba, the vast majority of the local economy is based on tourism. But in Cova da Onça, it's a lot more based on kind of extractive industries like fishing and also palm oil extraction, because just above Cova da Onça, they've got a lot of big palm trees which they extract this red palm oil, which is really quite famous, coming from Brazil and the northeast of Brazil. And so basically this means this entire project would surround Cova da Onça completely, which would make it really difficult for them to access the rest of the island, to access the mainland even, because they would constantly be having to go through this massive tourism development. And as well, when you have these sorts of things, when you have a kind of like a quiet community with its own way of life, when it's pushed up right beside luxury tourism and all these sorts of things, it will undoubtedly change the way that entire community works. And so that's the main issue there. And a lot of the people who are fighting against this particular project, as you mentioned there's a couple of the sources in the piece didn't even want their names to be mentioned, because there's fear that they will suffer some sort of threats or retaliation for speaking out against the project. There's one example of a local community leader, Raimundo Siri, everyone knows him on the island. Everyone knows him, especially in Cova da Onça. But because of the threats that he's received in relation with this tourist project, he's actually left the island for the first time in his life. Like, he's no longer living on Boipeba because of just how serious things have got. So yeah, it's one of the main hang-ups, I think, with this project. Not only will it take up potentially a fifth of the island, but also that the whole community of Cova da Onça could be changed forever.
And what is the current status of this planned development? Last I heard, the federal government suspended the permission for construction to start, but there's a different understanding between of the state government of Bahia says and what the federal government has ruled. So what's the current status of this development?
Well, so this is the fascinating thing. So you mentioned the state government there. What I said a couple of minutes ago was that Boipeba is federal land because it's an island that doesn't have a municipal headquarters. And so the surprise for everyone, I think, who was keeping up with this project was when in March, the state environmental agency in Bahia granted them a license to start building. Now, the state, because of everything I've explained there, the state has no jurisdiction over building on Boipeba. The state environmental agency basically can't license building works to begin on Boipeba. But that was the kind of the kickoff point for work to begin, and for the pressure in the opposite direction to really have to be stepped up, because people were seeing that the area that was going to become this tourism resort was being kind of separated. Some small digging works were starting to happen, and people were seeing that this was real, and they really had to fight against it. So what's happened then is, a lot of appeals were made to the SPU, which I mentioned before, who they are the federal agency that takes care of federal property in terms of land, with the involvement of public prosecutors, with the involvement of the local community, and they have petitioned to suspend the works there, and they managed to get a 90-day suspension, which that 90 days came and went, and then it was renewed for another 90 days, which that period that we're currently in at the moment. The fear is that this could just consistently, they're going to have to just keep asking for another 90 days and another 90 days, which is not really sustainable. It's not sustainable in the future, because that wealth that project is always going to be there. You know, like maybe like the moment that they let their guard down, or the moment that there are changes in kind of local politics, there could be the risk of the project finally being pushed forward, you know. So the main plan, it sounds like I was speaking to Hilton Coelho, who is a state lawmaker in Bahia. He's one of the main kind of political voices against this project in Boipeba. His plan is to issue a law in the Bahia state legislature, which would cancel the license indefinitely, and that would put an end to it, really, because after that there would no longer be any way for the project to go forward. But without that, it's always going to be in this kind of limbo of 90-day suspensions, people wanting to do work. And from what I understand from the people on the ground, the last time I spoke to people there, there's a feeling of tension. People are worried of potential violence flaring up, and there's fear of there's threats of violence constantly. But at the same time, I think something that's worth noting, that's something that really stuck with me while doing the interviews for this piece, is that a lot of the time you see big capital coming into to these traditional communities in Brazil, and there's maybe a sense of defeatism about it. Just like, there's all this money coming in, there's nothing we can do to stop this. But in Boipeba, it seems to be a little bit different. If ever I asked a question, just to give you an example, if ever I asked a question with a hypothetical, like, so if this goes ahead, if this project is built, I would always be first met with the answer, well, first of all, it's not going to happen. This can't happen. It won't happen. There's no way this can happen. So there's some resilience there, but that's not to say that there's not also concern and fear potentially for personal safety.
This is very interesting to know, and also from the media perspective. So Brazil's largest media conglomerate is the Globo Group, as you've mentioned, and one of the heirs of this group, one of the partners, one of the owners of this family business enterprise is involved in this attempted project. And even though Globo Group has covered the Boipeba situation in some of in its website, in its G1, from the news I've read, they mentioned the Boipeba situation, but they don't say who the owners of the coconut group are, and this specific story didn't air in Jornal Nacional, which is Brazil's main TV newscast. So they will place it on their website, but with some caveats as to mentioning who the people in the project are. It also it's interesting for me. It is a story as a reporters that we cover the environment. A lot of our foreign audience is concerned and knows about environmental concerns in the Amazon. But you've been to Bahia, which is very far away from the Amazon, and perhaps some of our foreign readers are not aware that Brazil has environmental situations with development outside of the Amazon too. Brazil is very big, and outside of the Amazon, there are developments and economic things that can be harmful to the environment as well.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Which we'll get into that in just 1 second, just to kind of remind everyone, as we always like to do in these videos, that we're giving all this away for free here on YouTube, all this excellent content. But this just to remind you that the Brazil This Week videos are powered by the Brazilian Report, which is the journalistic engine behind all of our kind of social media stuff, our video stuff, and our Explaining Brazil podcast as well, which I hope you've listened to. And just, we cover Brazil and Latin America, and it's a subscription-only website. So we really do need your subscriptions to help us to help us keep going as an independent media outlet, and help us expand our coverage. We cover Latin America, but it's always good to kind of expand as much as possible. And so we do urge you to check out Brazilian.report/subscribe. Andrea here is showing all of our lovely homepage at the moment, with our newsletters, and you can see just up at the top there that we are the winner of the best newsletter at the Digital Media Awards in the Americas this year. So if you want to check out the best newsletters in the Americas for this year, you should definitely check out Brazilian.report/subscribe. We've got lots of different membership tiers. There's definitely going to be something that kind of fits your budget there. And also you can help us out even more by checking out our Buy Me a Coffee page, which is a kind of donations platform that we have. You can buy coffee for our journalists. Cedê, do you have any coffee? There you go. Cedé's always ready with his cup of coffee. Because, you know, journalism, it requires a whole lot of caffeine, a whole lot of coffee. We have to stay up to all hours to get these stories done. And Buy Me a Coffee allows you to give us that extra support. So yeah, definitely check out buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian report, one word. We've also got that QR code that Cedé is so elegantly pointing to in the bottom right hand corner. And so you can also give us kind of one-off donations, but you can also join our Buy Me a Coffee community, which is that you give us a regular donation once every month, and you get a bunch of extra kind of benefits with that, like behind the scenes newsletters. You get extra podcasts with a new kind of trial, a new thing that we're trialing for our Buy Me a Coffee members. So yeah, definitely check that out. Lots of stuff there. And yeah, so just to get back to this then, Cedé's question about, it's everyone outside of Brazil, especially in North America and Europe, they all think about the Amazon with these conservation things. But yeah, that's right. Brazil has many more biomes than the Amazon. The vast majority of the funding is going to the Amazon these days. But the example of Boipeba is part of the Atlantic forest, which is, when the Portuguese arrived here in the 1500s, it was all they saw. The Atlantic forest running all the way down the northeastern coast, all the way down to the southern tip of Brazil. And it has since lost a huge percentage of its natural vegetation. There's very little of it left in terms of preserved forest.
And out of Brazil's 5 or so biomes, the Atlantic forest is the most degraded one, because it's one where the colonizers arrived first. It's the one that dominates the Brazilian coast. So it's the worst degraded one. And Boipeba is one of the rare examples of very well preserved Atlantic forest.
Yeah. And it's fascinating as well in Boipeba as a counterpoint with the tourist destination I mentioned at the beginning, Morro de São Paulo, which is right beside Boipeba. And that just really shows you the difference of when you can kind of let tourism and developing kind of get out of control a little bit, because Morro de São Paulo is a very naturally beautiful place, but it has really lost so much of its native vegetation. It is now very clearly a kind of tourist destination, whereas Boipeba has still maintained its character of being untouched. In many areas, it is completely untouched, and it shows the kind of the beautiful diversity of the Atlantic forest. There's a vast array of different kind of types of forest in there. There's these huge kind of coconut fields and the palm fields, which I was talking about, where they extract the oil from. There's mountains. It's honestly like it's a lovely place to visit, and I think it is important that we do preserve this, because, as Cedé said, this is the biome in Brazil that has been, it's been exploited ever since the first Portuguese boats arrived in Brazil. So yeah, we need to do what we can to keep it alive.
That was very instructive, Euan, and I would definitely want to go to Boipeba next when I go to vacation. I really want you to get to know this place before or if ever this project happens.
Yeah, thanks, Cedé. That was a really lovely conversation, and yeah, definitely, I would urge everyone watching to check out Boipeba. It's not difficult to go as in comparison to anywhere else in the northeast of Brazil. And yeah, as Cedé said, let's visit it while it's still the way it is. But yeah, again, if you listen to the locals, they will tell you that it's always going to stay that way. So it was really heartening to hear that. And yeah, definitely, as André, our producer, was showing during the video there, was showing our the story on our website on Brazilian.report. He's going to show it one more time. So yeah, make sure that you check that out. Paradise lost the Battle of Boipeba against the Billionaires. We've got all the information in there, what we talked about, and a lot more as well. And of course, at the Brazilian Report, we will be keeping up with the developments on this. If there is a conclusion, if there is an outcome at some point, we will definitely be going back to this story and producing more work on that. So I think all that's left to say, Cedé, is thanks very much for joining me today. a reporter from Brasília. And yeah, as I said, make sure you check out Brazilian.report/subscribe. It's on the top of your screen, and it's also on below your screen. And check out the Brazilian Reports page on Buy Me a Coffee, which you can access through the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner. And the link is also there on your screen, buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report. So that was another edition of Brazil This Week. We will be back next week. It might be us, it might be different guests, but we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot, Cedê, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you, Euan. See you next time.
Bye-bye.